Good morning. Welcome to all those worshiping with us in person and online. The past 2 weeks have been a time of sadness in our church community. Our hearts and continued prayers go out to Carol and family. We are grateful for the time yesterday to celebrate Brian's life and the memories he leaves us with. The flowers here in the sanctuary today are a tribute to Brian's amazing legacy as a gardener, friend, and member of our church family. This coming week is a time to reflect and remember those who have given their bravery and, in many cases, their lives for the freedom of others. I visited the Indigenous Affairs website this week. I learned that over 7,000 First Nations actively served in World War I and II, in addition to an undetermined number of Métis and Inuit peoples. First Nations soldiers brought their skills to the war effort, as many excelled with their hunting and scout abilities. During World War II, sometimes messages were even coded in Cree language so that they could not be deciphered if they were intercepted by the enemy. There were many honors given to Indigenous soldiers. I know we will read the honor rolls today of our local soldiers, but I would like to add a couple of Indigenous soldier names here as well. Willard Bolduc, an Ojibwe airman from Ontario, earned the Distinguished Flying Cross for his brave actions as an air gunner during bombing raids over occupied Europe. Huron Brant, a Mohawk from Ontario, earned the Military Medal for his courage while fighting in Sicily. Sadly, after the wars, the Canadian government failed to treat the First Nations soldiers with the same compensations and respect as other soldiers. But they too are a part of our history and deserve to be recognized and remembered. I invite you to visit the website to learn more about our First Nations contributions to the war effort. There are many amazing stories that deserve to be retold. And with those thoughts, we acknowledge with respect and history the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe people, who include the people of the Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations, on whose traditional territories we gather. Their ancestors signed treaties with our ancestors. We give thanks also to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, and recognize the Métis and Inuit, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. And now, as I light the Christ candle, I invite you to take 3 calming breaths. Think about honoring our loved ones lost in peacetime and in conflicts, and how we can learn to live in community with our neighbors. This brings into focus our time to learn and worship. And now on to our announcements. There are about 3 pages as printed in and sent out on the email. Please feel free to read them at your leisure. Having a problem. Please join us after the service. The coffee is on. And Julian will also have a longer presentation of his big idea this morning. So there's lots of food downstairs and some more learning for us. Please keep in mind the announcements for Share and Safe and Sound. And are there any other announcements? Seeing none, we will.
So what's about to happen is not the way we always done it, but it'll be okay. We said at session it might be good if we change something this year so that you don't blame everything on the next minister. So I'm going to do a call, and then we're going to see the rolls. You know the rolls. They're at the back corner. Look over your shoulder. They're still there. But they're not piled up at the communion table this year, and we're not going to read every single name. We're not forgetting who's on those lists. We're inviting you to do your own work between your ears, behind your forehead, watching the screen. I'd also say to you that hymn 494, those hearts that we have treasured, that Julian will be playing, it's worth reading the lyrics. If not now, then later. All right? And then from now on, it should feel vaguely familiar. And at the end of the projection, Murray will come and read, and then we'll all stand for last post silence and reveille. Okay? They shall not grow old, as we who are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the passing days condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them.
Thanks, Julian, for all you do. As I look around, I believe my wife and I would be the only people that are old enough to remember the Second World War. Just a matter of interest. I don't see any other. Oh, sorry. Yes, there are 3 in the audience. Yes. So I was going through some material I had on Remembrance Day from Veterans Affairs, and before I read the ultimate poem, I have another one called Why Wear a Poppy, and it was written by Don Crawford. It may be of interest to you. Why wear a poppy? Please wear a poppy, the lady said, and held one forth, but I shook my head. Then I stopped and watched as she offered them there, and her face was old and lined with care. But beneath the scars the years had made, there remained a smile that refused to fade. A boy came whistling down the street, bouncing along on carefree feet. His smile was full of joy and fun. "Lady," he said, "may I have one?" When she pinned it on, he turned to say, "Why do you wear a poppy today?" The lady smiled in her wistful way and answered, "This is Remembrance Day, and the poppy there is a symbol for the gallant men who died in the war. And because they did, you and I are free. That's why we wear a poppy, you see." I had a boy about your size with golden hair and big blue eyes. He loved to play and jump and shout. Free as a bird, he would race about. As the years went by, he learned and grew and became a man, as you will too. He was fine and strong with a boyish smile, but he seemed with us just a little while. When war broke out and he went away, I still remember his face that day. When he smiled at me and said goodbye, "I'll be back soon, Mom. Please don't cry." But the war went on and he had to stay, and all I could do was wait and pray. His letters told of the awful fight. I can see it still in my dreams at night. With the tanks and guns and cruel barbed wire and the mines and bullets, the bombs and fire. Till at last, the war was won. And that's why we wear a poppy, son. The small boy turned as if to go, then said, "Thanks, lady. I'm glad to know that sure did sound like an awful fight. But your son, did he come back at night all right?" A tear rolled down each faded cheek. She shook her head, but didn't speak. I slunk away in sort of shame, and if you were me, you'd have done the same. For our thanks in giving is oft delayed, though our freedom was bought and thousands paid. And so when we see a poppy worn, let us reflect on the burden borne by those who gave their very all when asked to answer their country's call, that we at home in peace might live, then wear a poppy, remember and give. The final reading is our annual poem of In Flanders Fields, and written by Dr. John McCrae, native of Guelph, Ontario. And in April 1915, one of Dr. John McCrae's closest friends and comrades was killed in the trenches near Ypres, Belgium. He was buried in a humble grave with simple wooden cross. Wild poppies bloomed between the crosses, marking the many graves. The next day, unable to help his friend or any of the others who had died, Dr. McCrae gave them a voice through this poem. In part because of the poem's popularity, the poppy was adopted as the flower of remembrance. The symbolic poppy and John McCrae's poems are still linked, and voices of those who have died in war continued to be heard each Remembrance Day. In Flanders fields. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up the quarrel with the foe. To you from falling hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
She said to her, "All that you say, I will do." And then at chapter 4, so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When they came together, the Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you on this day without next of kin, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and became his nurse. The women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse, the father of David. God still speaks. Thanks be to God. And now I read from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 12, verses 38 through 44. As he taught, he said, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and to have the best seats in the synagogue and the places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses, and for the sake of appearance say long prayers. They will receive greater condemnation." He sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then he called his disciples and said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all that she had to live on." God still speaks. Thanks be to God.
We've been doing responsive psalms, one side and the other. You can decide what side you're on. Let's sing the refrain, or hear the refrain once, sing it once, and then start. Unless God builds a house, its builders have labored in vain.
Unless God watches over the city, those who keep watch stay awake in vain. In vain you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil. For those who God loves are given sleep.
The hand of God feeds us and answers our needs.
Truly, children are a gift from God, and offspring a reward from God's hand. Like arrows in a warrior's hand, so indeed are the children of one's youth. Happy are those who have their quiver full of them. They will not be put to shame when they meet their adversaries at the gate.
The hand of God feeds us and answers all our needs. Well, it's not 11:30 yet, but we'll be a little briefer. Tomorrow is Remembrance Day, the 11th hour, the 11th day, the 11th month, the Great War silenced by the armistice, the war to end all wars. Not coincidentally, this is also the end of Holocaust Education Week. Since 1982, for 42 years, we've been observing Holocaust Education Week, just before Remembrance Day, remembering the genocide of 6 million Jews. Now, you know I should come back and give you the travel log of my holiday, right? So last weekend, I was in Amsterdam for 3 days. And I went to the Jude's Museum. Took me 2 days, the Jewish Museum in Amsterdam. If ever you get the chance, you pay the admission and you're good for a week. You can keep going back because they know that it blows you away. You can only go for so long. Then you got to come back. So we came back the next day to the Portuguese synagogue, the big Sephardic synagogue, the biggest synagogue in Europe, the longest continuous functioning synagogue because of the events of the Holocaust. Since 1675, they've been worshiping there. They don't have electricity in there, just candles. You think we got hard times getting started in the morning. No projection on the wall there. On the Sunday morning, I went to the Westerkerk. And as I said to a couple of you, the first weekend I went to a German Mass. Second weekend I went to a Dutch Reformed, all in Dutch. And I got a feeling of what it's like for the rest of you. The minister goes on and on, you haven't got a clue what he's saying. And yet, it's worth doing, isn't it? And after that, we went out into the Dam Square and into the Bijenkorf fancy luxury department store where we could afford one Christmas ornament, and back out into the Dam Square. Now, most of you who are better traveled than I know about the brass plaques 2 inches square that are built into the pavement in the cities in Europe. And each of these brass plaques tells you where a Jewish person or family lived before the Holocaust and did not live after the Holocaust. And there's a lot of those brass plaques. It's a sobering thing to look down at your feet and keep seeing these things everywhere you go. Why was there such a big Jewish community in Amsterdam? Because they'd been kicked out of the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, by the Spanish Inquisition. To be Moranos, to be Conversos, to be Cryptos. Why was there so much opportunity in Amsterdam? Because of the slave trade. Like nobody's got clean hands, eh? Throughout history, us included. Anyhow, there is a point. I'm not just giving you a travel log. On Thursday, do you know what happened in Amsterdam? There was a soccer game between Amsterdam, Ajax, and Maccabi Tel Aviv. And the lads, the youths, the louts, went to the Amsterdam Square, the Dam Square, the streets that I'd been in a couple of days before, and they started beating up on each other and tearing up each other's flags. Young lads. And it means a lot, doesn't it? When you're having that fight on top of those brass plaques, that close to those museums, in the echoes of those memories, and since the Holocaust, wars, not just October 7th and the Gaza bombing for the last year, but 1948, 1967, 1973, 1988, Intifada 1, Oslo Accords, Intifada 2, ringing any bells? Nobody can get oriented to this. And we get focused on the bombs exploding and the conflict and the combatants, and sometimes we lose track of the general level of anxiety, not only in Gaza under the bombs, but everywhere in the globe. What's it like to be feeling anxious, vulnerable, anywhere in the globe, if you're Jewish these days? And people are reacting to what the IDF and the Netanyahu government's doing, but they're confusing who it is that's doing what. What's it like to be Palestinian, having gotten out and working over at the Bruce Nuclear and hearing this news. Most of us, most of our lives, most of the time, are not on battlefields. Those that are, their lives are changed. Most of us don't have to lose somebody in warfare. But the ripple effects and the penumbra around it, the way violence works, the way violation works, the way vulnerability works, is a thing I have been too privileged to really know. But the women I know it better than I do. To walk in a dark street, to walk into an office, to know vulnerability. And I'm inviting you today, even though it's Remembrance Day, to listen to these two lessons in the echoes of those stories. Reflect on Ruth, an economic migrant fleeing famine. You know the world is full of economic migrants right now, most of them women and children. Ruth is an economic migrant fleeing famine. And she and her mother-in-law Naomi stick together after their husbands have died. They're gleaning, they're picking up what's left over after the farmers have harvested. Beggars for leftovers. They're vulnerable, they're exposed. Naomi past childbearing, Ruth not born Jewish. Naomi reads the risk and tells Ruth to take a chance. Go to the threshing floor to Boaz. Is she supposed to seduce him? What a risk to be misconstrued, misunderstood, abused by the men on the threshing floor who've been working all day. What makes that choice seem wise? And yet Ruth does. Boaz responds honorably, and David's line begins. Yes, it's a story of patriarchy. It's horribly offensive. Can't be read apart from the hashtag #MeToo and the hashtag #ChurchToo of the last few years. The abuse of power by men in relation to women. This was not a romance story, was it? But it's also a tale of loyalty between women, of risk rewarded. I keep saying to people who want to use this in weddings, your people be my people, where you go, I will go. I say, that's something said by women to women, and that's really good when women marry women, and we do those celebrations. But you know, the original was a woman talking to a woman. And if you were listening, this whole story was women. Women celebrating with Naomi, celebrating with Ruth when the child is born. Naomi taking care of her daughter-in-law's kid. Fast forward a millennium, because I have to be done soon, because we ran a little long at the front end. Fast forward, gospel. Millennium later, 1,000 years later, Roman rule, occupation. We're under occupation, not unlike Amsterdam, 1939 to 1945, eh? We're under occupation. Where do you go for help? You go to the synagogue. You go to the temple. You bring some of what you got, and we share it back out. That's how the temple treasury was working, as a sort of a social assistance, social service agency for unoccupied people under the Romans. And Jesus, in from up north with his disciples, watches and helps his disciples, who are also rubes from outside the city, to discern what they're seeing. He says, look at that. Look at the rich guys. Look at the guys with the robes and the fancy clothes. Now let me show you what really matters. See that widow? They just put the 2 crummy coins in. That's what you ought to be watching for. Now, Ron pointed out on Thursday, this was not a shrewd act by the woman. If that's all she got, what are the odds if you put your 2 coins in, you're going to get it back? And then the minister's not going to take it for his pay. And yet she took a risk. You hear the pattern here? She took a risk. And she's the model. She's the heroine in the story today. And even if she's unrewarded, she's inspiring. Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza, 50 years ago, wrote this book in memory of her that's been sitting on my shelf since I got here, pointing out that if you want to find the women in the Bible, they're there, often between the lines and sometimes right there in the text, and you're just ignoring them. German Roman Catholic biblical scholar. Most of the characters in the Ruth story are women. Most of the people, most of the time, living with vulnerability and helping one another assess risks and take risks and find rewards are women. Not the scribes, the rich, the visibly generous, but the silently sacrificial ones who are really counting on a commonwealth where we help one another. I'm going to close, honest, with a poem from Dorothy Zull, another German theologian that I like post-war. And she puts it this way in a book called Revolutionary Patience, 1978. She said, "He needs you. That's all there is to it. Without you, he's left hanging. Goes up in Dachau's smoke, is sugar and spice in the baker's hands, gets revalued in the next stock market crash. He's consumed and blown away, used up without you. Help him. That's what faith is. He can't bring it about. His kingdom couldn't then, couldn't later, can't now. Not, at any rate, without you. And that is his irresistible appeal." Listen now. Blessed are you, God of the universe. You have created us and given us life. Blessed are you, God of the planet Earth. You have set our world like a radiant jewel in the heavens and filled it with action and beauty and suffering and struggle and hope. Blessed are you, God of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and all the peoples who live there, in all the lessons they have learned and all that remains for them to do. Blessed are you because you need us, because you make us worthwhile, because you give us people to love, work to do for your universe, for your world, and for ourselves. Amen. Be seated. And Well, you can tell that the World Council of Churches cycle of prayer has taken us to Aotearoa. I'll never get it right. I've been working on it for 30 years. They're way ahead of us on Indigenous rights in New Zealand. And they can pronounce that. So we'll echo some of their prayers as we consolidate our own. And in the end, I think we'll sing the Lord's Prayer. Let us pray. Holy One, may your realm of love come for the insignificant, unremarkable, overlooked people of the world, for the unnoticed and simply ordinary people, backwater sort of people who will never make much impact. For them, may your kingdom come. Holy One, may your realm of love come for those who are lost, who have disappeared or are missing, for the uprooted, the exiled and enslaved, lost rights sort of people who will seldom be heard, seen or heard. For them, may your kingdom come. Holy One, may your realm of love come for the fearful, the terrorized, the abused people of the world, those who are unjustly imprisoned or entrapped, voiceless people who will hardly dare to seek help. For them, may your kingdom come. Holy One, may your realm of love come for the subjugated, silenced, and subdued people of the world, for the lonely, the lacking, the faded, the frightened, the shadowy people unable to bring attention to their suffering. For them, may your kingdom come. Holy One, may your realm of love come for all persons with disabilities, for the redundant and poorly educated, the timid and unappreciated, struggling people who have to strive for support and respect. For them, may your kingdom come. In the dynamic of your love, may your realm become a reality for all of them. God, you know that we have lived under a shadow this week of bereavement for all those bereaved by the death of Brian, for the Glaves family and all those bereaved by the death of John Paul, for our whole country, acknowledging the loss of the Honorable Murray Sinclair. And Mark reminds us that Don Howard died 30 years ago this weekend. We bring all our prayers, those too deep for words, the gaps, the silences, and we listen for one another. We watch out for one another. We lift up one another's prayers as our own, and we find thanksgiving for the gifts that we've got, for your reign over our commonwealth. And when words fail, we join to sing in words we were taught. we've hit 11:30, but we're going to sing anyhow. It's going to be the church's one foundation. I'll send you out, and then we'll sing Go Now in Peace. And you should stay and listen for the music. I'm sorry we went long. It'll be okay. Just realized I never turned the mic on. So it was kind of like that German-Dutch thing for you. You got no clue what I said today, but hopefully God spoke to you instead. Go in peace, and may you find peace. Go in love, and may you share love. Go with God, for God will surely go with you. Amen. And so we sing. And don't forget to hear more about Eufy. Was her nickname, Euphemia.